Let me start with something most people have never thought about clearly. You were born into a family, but over time, that family slowly became something within your psychological life. The voices, the expectations, the emotional climate, the things that were welcomed, the things that were punished, the things that were ignored, the things that made you feel safe, the things that made you feel ashamed, the things that taught you who you had to become to belong. Those things did not disappear just because time passed. They became part of the psychological system you now live from. And that matters because most people are trying to change their life without understanding the internal world their life is being generated from. They are trying to improve behavior without understanding the family system underneath the behavior. They are trying to change outcomes without understanding the thinking that produced the outcome. They are trying to construct a new identity without understanding the inner parts already shaping it. And psychology has names for pieces of this: internal working models, attachment structures, protective adaptations, internalized relational patterns, parts, schema, self-organization. GYG has language for it too. You are not just living life. You are living from a system. And when the system inside you is divided, the life outside you will often reflect that division. That is why one part of you can want peace, while another part keeps choosing chaos. One part can want healthy love, while another part keeps gravitating towards what is familiar, not what is healthy. One part can want growth, while another part keeps protecting old pain. And many people call that inconsistency. But psychology has names for this too: internal conflict, fragmentation, competing parts, unintegrated self-states. In GYG, we call you to understand something deeper. You are a family, not just because you came from one, but because there is a family within you now, a system of parts, a system of beliefs, a system of needs, a system of protective responses, a system of interpretations, a system of rehearsed ways of being. You have one physical body. You have one brain. And the functions of that brain allow multiple minds to develop over time through your thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and behaviors. And each of those parts often wears a hat: the hat of son, the hat of daughter, the hat of sibling, the hat of cousin, the hat of friend, the hat of employee, the hat of employer, the hat of helper, the hat of protector, the hat of performer, the hat of enemy. And each hat operates from a developed mind made out of thoughts and beliefs, emotions and behaviors. So the issue is not simply that you have roles. The issue is that different roles can activate different minds. And when those minds are not communicating, life starts feeling contradictory. That system affects everything: how you think, how you speak, how you behave, how devoted you are, how integrated you are, what trajectories you build, what identity you eventually live out. So this video is about family, but it is also about real. It is about learning to recognize every aspect of life without denial. It is about IDC. It is about becoming intentional, deliberate, and creative rather than unconsciously repetitive. It is about think it, speak it, do it. Because what lives inside your internal family eventually comes through your mind, your mouth, and your movement. It is about devotion because parts form around what they had to protect and what they had to preserve. It is about integration because healing requires communication inside the system. It is about trajectories because repeated internal patterns create repeated external lives. And it is about identity construction because who you became is not random, it is built. So today, we are not just talking about childhood. We are talking about how a human being becomes a human being and how healing begins when the family within learns how to work together. Every human being begins life inside a family system. And that family system is not only giving you experiences, it is giving you psychological instructions. It teaches you how emotions are expressed, how anger is handled, how affection is shown, how mistakes are treated, how vulnerability is received, how closeness feels, how truth is handled, how conflict gets resolved or avoided, whether your needs are welcome, whether your voice matters. Your nervous system is learning all of this before you can explain any of it. So the family is not just around the child. The family is shaping the child's internal architecture. This is where GYG must immediately bring in real. Because healing starts when people start reducing family to, they loved me or they hurt me. Real says, recognize every aspect of life, meaning what was given, what was missing, what was beautiful, what was painful, what was explicit, what was subtle, what was traumatic, what was confusing, what looked normal, but quietly distorted development. A lot of people do not heal because they only examine extremes. But human development is often shaped by subtleties, a tone, a silence, a lack of repair, a repeated dismissal, an inconsistency, an unspoken role assignment. A child does not need a flawed family to develop pain. Sometimes they simply need a family that repeatedly failed to understand what their spirit, nervous system, emotional world, and developing mind needed. And the child adapts, which brings us to the next layer. Not everybody in the same family becomes the same person. Why? Because the family is the environment, but the child is also interpreting that environment. And that interpretation starts building the family within. As the child lives, feels, thinks, and interprets, parts begin to form. This is where family becomes much deeper than family of origin. Because now we are talking about the family within the self, the sacred part, the striving part, the angry part, the ashamed part, the invisible part, the performing part, the hyper-independent part, the pleasing part, the watchful part, the grieving part. And each part often wears a hat, a child hat, a son hat, a daughter hat, a sibling hat, a peacemaker hat, an achiever hat, an invisible hat, the caretaker hat. And that hat operates from a mind that developed through repeated thoughts and beliefs, emotions and behaviors. This is where GYG must bring in IDC, intentional, deliberate, creative. Because what most people call my personality is often a collection of repeated adaptations that were created unconsciously. So before a person becomes intentional, deliberate, and creative, they are often living automatically, conditioned, rehearsed, triggered, protective, patterned. DC begins when a person realizes, I did not consciously choose all of this. That does not remove responsibility, but it does create clarity. And clarity matters because you cannot become deliberate about what you have never accurately named. Many people are trying to be creative with a self they have never fully understood. But your creativity gets buried when too much of your energy is spent protecting old pain. This is why family matters so much. If the family within is organized around fear, shame, performance or protection. Then spontaneity, creativity, and aligned living get buried under survival logic. So the goal is not just to identify parts. The goal is to understand what formed them. What are they protecting? What are they afraid would happen without their role? What truth are they carrying? What distortion are they carrying? What need never got met? What hat are they wearing now? What mind is operating through that hat? That is real. This is IDC beginning. And that takes us to trajectories. Children do not just experience life. They think about life. They assign meaning to life. They draw conclusions from life. And that is where trajectories begin. This is one of the deepest GYG truths. Experiences matter, but the meaning made from experience often shapes the trajectory even more powerfully. If a child experiences criticism, they may think, I need to be perfect. If a child experiences inconsistency, they may think, I need to monitor everybody. If a child experiences emotional absence, they may think, I should not need much. If a child experiences chaos, they may think, I need control. If a child experiences shame, they may think, there is something wrong with me. And once a thought becomes believable, it becomes influential. This is where the GYG system must explicitly bring in think it, speak it, do it. Because what the child thinks internally becomes the way the child begins speaking internally. And what the child keeps speaking internally becomes what the child begins doing behaviorally. Think it. I am too much. I am not enough. I have to earn love. I need to keep the peace. I should hide this part of me. I have to be strong. Speak it through self-talk, through silence, through the stories they tell themselves, through the language they use to describe who they are, through what they repeatedly confess inwardly. Do it. People please. Withdraw. Overperform. Self-silence. Over-explain. Avoid intimacy. Cling. Control. Hide. Numb. Recreate old dynamics. A repeated thought is never just a thought. If rehearsed long enough, it becomes internal language. If internal language is repeated long enough, it becomes embodied behavior. If embodied behavior is repeated long enough, it becomes a life. That is why family is not just about where you come from. It is about how origin becomes trajectory. And once the trajectory starts, devotion begins forming too. People often think devotion is something spiritual, motivational, or aspirational. But devotion begins much earlier than that. Every human being becomes devoted to something. The question is not whether devotion exists. The question is what the system has become devoted to. Some internal families become devoted to peacekeeping. Some become devoted to performance. Some become devoted to invisibility. Some become devoted to control. Some become devoted to emotional self-protection. Some become devoted to earning love. Some become devoted to never feeling that pain again. And here is the hard truth. A person can consciously say they want growth while unconsciously being devoted to safety. They can say they want intimacy while being devoted to emotional distance. They can say they want authenticity while being devoted to approval. They can say they want expansion while being devoted to predictability. So in the GYG system, family must connect directly to devotion because the internal family reveals what the person has learned to protect, preserve, worship, repeat, and obey. Some people are not struggling because they lack desire. They are struggling because different parts of them are devoted to different gods: approval, safety, performance, comfort, control, belonging, avoidance, truth, growth. And until that is named, people stay confused. They say, why do I keep doing what I said I would not do? Because saying is not the same as devotion. The most powerful devotion is often not what a person declares. It is what their internal system repeatedly serves. That is why family has to be understood before transformation. Because devotion grows in the context of internal family dynamics. Now we move deeper. Because attachment style and self-esteem do not exist outside this conversation. They grow inside it. How the person relates. Attachment style shapes how the person relates to closeness, dependence, need, safety, and repair. Self-esteem shapes how the person relates to worth, competence, acceptability, and belonging. And both begin affecting the family within. A securely attached internal family has more capacity for care, regulation, repair, and internal trust. An anxiously attached internal family may become preoccupied, reactive, reassurance seeking, and afraid of internal abandonment. An avoidantly attached internal family may dismiss need, distance from pain, and detach from softer parts. A disorganized internal family may simultaneously crave connection and fear it. And self-esteem grows right beside that because the child is not only learning how do relationships work, they are also learning what am I worth in relationship. This is why self-esteem cannot be reduced to confidence. Confidence is often situational. Self-esteem is relational, especially relational with self. And here we need to make something even clearer. In GYG language, self-esteem is not just how you feel about yourself. And it is not just the confidence you have in yourself to do a thing. Those are often byproducts. Self-esteem is made up of three things: self-concept, self-image, and self-esteem. The self is anything about you that can be rated. Your thoughts, your emotions, your wit, your sense of humor, your style of dress, your abilities, your behaviors, your appearance. Essentially, the me that can be described. Esteem comes from the word estimate. It is about value and worth. So each individual assigns value and worth through their own thoughts and beliefs. Self-concept is how you think about you and how you think others think about you. If it matches what you value, high value tends to be assigned. You tend to feel good. If it does not match, low value tends to be assigned and you tend to feel bad. Self-image is how you see you and how you see others seeing you. If it matches what you value, high value tends to be assigned. If it does not match, low value tends to be assigned. And this is where many people become psychologically harmful to themselves. They stop rating aspects of self and start globally rating the whole self. Instead of saying, I did something ineffective, they conclude, I am ineffective. Instead of saying, I behaved poorly, they conclude, I am bad. Instead of saying, I failed at this, they conclude, I am a failure. And GYG teaches people to stop globally rating themselves. You can rate a thought. You can rate a behavior. You can rate a decision. You can rate a skill. But a whole human being is too complex to be reduced to one totalizing rating. And now the GYG system must bring family into direct contact. And now the GYG system must bring family into direct contact with integration. Because when attachment wounds and self-esteem wounds are active, the person often starts excommunicating parts: the needy part, the dependent part, the hurt part, the angry part, the ashamed part, the frightened part. And once parts are excommunicated, the self becomes internally divided. That is why integration is not optional. It is necessary. because no one functions at their highest capacity while at war with parts of themselves. Integration is one of the deepest needs of the human mind, not perfection, integration. Integration means parts that were disconnected begin to communicate. It means thoughts, emotions, needs, memories, and behaviors stop operating like strangers. It means the internal family is no longer a house divided against itself. This is where family becomes active healing rather than just insight. Because first and most importantly, love yourself means I stop leading my internal family with contempt. I stop running the system through shame. I stop treating wounded parts like enemies. I stop confusing suppression with healing. And integration requires several GYG movements at once. It requires real. I must recognize every aspect of what is actually there. It requires IDC. I must become intentional, deliberate, and creative about how I now respond. It requires think it, speak it, do it. I must examine my thoughts, change my internal language, and practice new behaviors. It requires devotion. I must stay committed to this work, even when old patterns try to reclaim leadership. Healing is not when one part of you wins. Healing is when the family within no longer has to live like enemies. Integration means the achiever can hear the exhausted part. The angry part can understand without running the whole system. The scared part can be comforted without becoming the ruler. The grieving part can speak without being exiled. The child part can be seen without being shamed. The part wearing the employee hat can learn from the part wearing the friend hat. The part wearing the protector hat can begin to trust the part developing wisdom. The part wearing the performer hat can stop believing performance is the only path to worth. That is maturity. That is healing. That is alignment. And that is what makes new trajectories possible. A trajectory is not a single behavior. It is the direction a pattern keeps taking you. And this is why family is so foundational in GYG, because the internal family shapes the minds that produce the trajectory. If the family within is critic-led, the trajectory may become chronic striving, burnout, and emptiness. If the family within is shame-led, the trajectory may become hiding, self-silencing, and underliving. If the family within is fear-led, the trajectory may become control, avoidance, and constriction. If the family within is approval-led, the trajectory may become people-pleasing, resentment, and self-loss. But if the family within becomes increasingly integrated, honest, self-supportive, and aligned, the trajectory changes. Now the person can choose differently, speak differently, relate differently, rest differently, create differently, love differently. This is where the GYG system is so powerful, because it teaches that life is not only changed by dramatic breakthroughs, it is changed by repeated internal reorganization. A life changes when the system producing the life changes. And once the trajectory changes consistently, identity begins changing too. Identity is not random. It is constructed from experience, interpretation, belief, attachment, internal language, behavioral repetition, devotion, integration, and trajectory. So when a person says, "This is just who I am," that statement needs to be examined carefully, because sometimes that is truth. And sometimes that is the rehearsed identity built around old pain. This is where family must land inside identity construction. Because if the internal family is fragmented, ashamed, fear-based, approval-driven, or cut off from truth, Identity will often reflect that. But if the internal family becomes more loving, aware, deliberate, devoted, and integrated, identity also changes. Now, the person is no longer merely the product of what happened. They become a participant in who they are becoming. That is IDC fully alive, intentional, deliberate, creative. The goal is to become constructed in truth rather than unconsciously assembled around survival. So GYG does not teach people to invent the self. It teaches them to understand the self, stop globally rating the self, integrate the self, and build in alignment with truth. That is identity construction. Let me pause and bring the whole system together. Family is where the internal world begins. Real is what lets you honestly see what is there. IDC is how you stop living automatically and start living intentionally. Think it, speak it, do it explains how internal beliefs become external life. Devotion reveals what the system actually serves. Integration heals fragmentation. Trajectories show where repeated patterns take you. Identity construction reveals who all of this is building. So these are not 8 random ideas. They are one living psychological system. And family is the foundation. Because when you do not understand the family within, you misread the rest of the system. Let me leave you with something to think about. You are not just someone who came from a family. You are someone who became a family within. A family of thoughts, a family of beliefs, a family of parts, a family of needs, a family of fears, a family of protective responses, a family of longings, a family of rehearsed internal relationships. And the quality of your life is deeply influenced by how the family functions. If the family within is divided, life will often feel divided. If the family within is ashamed, life will often feel constricted. If the family within is hostile, life will often feel heavy. If the family within is cut off, life will often feel confusing. But when the family within becomes more honest, more loving, more intentional, more integrated, and more aligned, the whole system starts changing. You start recognizing every aspect of life more clearly. You start becoming more intentional, deliberate, and creative. You start noticing what you think, how you speak, and what you keep doing. You start seeing what you are truly devoted to. You start integrating what once was cut off. You start changing your trajectories. And eventually, you start becoming someone different. Not because you betrayed yourself, but because you finally began loving yourself deeply enough to understand, guide, and integrate the family within. That is family. First and most importantly, love yourself. And that is not shallow. That is structural. That is developmental. That is relational. That is psychological. That is spiritual. That is G. If you want to understand the deeper psychology shaping your life, subscribe and grow with this community. Because here, we are not just talking about mental health in fragments. We are building a full framework for understanding how human beings are formed, how they get stuck, and how they heal, and how they grow. This is not just content. This is a system. This is Grow Yourself Great. Understanding your psychology matters. It helps you understand the patterns shaping your life. Understand clearly. Integrate deeply. Grow yourself great.